Hello and welcome to the second Cygnus Destroyer Top 10. I've noticed that there's been a heavy focus on the NES in my videos recently, so it's time to temporarily shift away from my number one system and talk about my second love, the Sega Genesis. Anyone who grew up during the early 90s should remember the Sega vs. Nintendo 16-bit console war. It was an amazing era for gaming and a lot of classic titles were produced for both sides. I was fortunate enough to own a Genesis and Super Nintendo back then, and I thoroughly enjoyed both. With that said though, I've become more of a Sega guy as an adult, so I've decided to channel the spirit of that old ad slogan and showcase 10 reasons that the Genesis does what Nintendon't. Or in other words, 10 games that were available for the Genesis, but not the SNES. Before we start the list, I want to put out a few disclaimers. First, this is not an anti-Super Nintendo video. Like I said before, I loved both consoles as a kid, and I still love them both. This is just for fun and to feature a few games that deserve more recognition. Second is that this is limited to the carts that I own. If an exclusive you love is missing, there's the possibility that I don't own it. Third, some of these entries were also released on the Master System, Game Gear, and other platforms. I'm using the term exclusive in this case to mean that they were only available on the Genesis and not the Super Nintendo during the 4th generation. Finally, and I can't stress this enough, this is all just my opinion. I'm not saying that these are the best that the Genesis has to offer. I would definitely put some of them way up there, but that doesn't mean that they're the universal best. We all have our own opinions and no one is more correct than the next. Now that it's out of the way, let's start things off with a really classy title that goes by the name of...
Awesome Kickstarter machine knows what.
I'm awesome. I'm awesome.
Whoa, wait a minute. That's not the right clip. That is a Genesis exclusive and one that I find to be really amusing, but it's not cut out for this list.
Oh. I'm so cool.
You're not so awesome.
No!
Anyway, let's try this again.
Awful.
That's the one, and this is actually awesome. I've already gone into full detail about this in my review from about 2 years ago, but to give a brief summary, it's a license-based platformer from Treasure, the makers of Dynamite Headdy and Gunstar Heroes, two excellent honorable mentions for this list. The story of Treasureland Adventure is simple, but the gameplay is excellent. Taking inspiration from Sonic, the developers at Treasure came up with something that transcends its influences and stands on its own. The visual presentation is stunning, the level design is incredibly creative, and the music covers a wide range of genres, and does so exquisitely. I fell in love with the Moon theme while I was capturing footage, and when I was a guest on the Pixel Tunes radio podcast, it was one of the first picks that I chose for my playlist. It's complete audio bliss. McDonald's Treasureland Adventure is one licensed tie-in that can hold its own against even the big boys of the genre, and I can't recommend it enough. One of the launch titles in the original pack-in for the console, Altered Beast was my first taste of what the Genesis had to offer, and it was on a whole other level in regards to tone. Altered Beast was dark. Altered Beast felt mature, as if I was too young to be playing it. As soon as I pressed start and I heard,
Rise from your grave.
I knew I was in for an experience that I'd never had with a controller in my hand before. Altered Beast originated in the arcades and, as mentioned previously, was ported to the Master System around the same time, and while the Master System version is respectable for 8 bits, the Genesis version is where it's at. Part beat 'em up and part side scroller, Altered Beast excels on both fronts, featuring high quality voice samples, impressive graphics, tight satisfying action, and a haunting soundtrack that perfectly sets the mood. When I think of the Genesis, Altered Beast immediately comes to mind, and rightfully so. It kicks ass! Disney was synonymous with Capcom on the NES, but Virgin produced some of the company's best tie-ins during the 16-bit era, and this one is at the very top. Of course, there was an Aladdin release for the Super Nintendo, which was developed by Capcom, but it's completely different from that on the Genesis. This is the one that I grew up with, and I prefer it to this day. Even Shinji Mikami, one of the developers that worked on the SNES title, prefers the Genesis Aladdin. While Capcom's is akin to a traditional platformer with Prince of Persia elements, Virgin's is more of a hack and slash, with Aladdin's awesome sword always at the forefront. Aladdin slices and dices and tosses apples at his foes to some great tunes ripped straight from the film. Aladdin is a ton of fun, and anyone who seeks it out is in for a whole new world of platforming excellence. Veterans of my channel know that I'm a huge beat-em-up fan, and Golden Axe was a major catalyst in my love for the genre. Whereas most beat-em-ups were set in present day, Golden Axe took place in a fantasy setting with a colorful cast of characters. We've got the typical male warrior, the scantily clad sword mistress, and the badass axe-wielding dwarf. Golden Axe is a pretty standard button masher, but it's incredibly fun and the fantasy vibe really adds to the appeal. The characters can ride beasts which whip at or burn any foes in their way. On top of that, little gnomes will pop up every now and then, carrying a sack with magic and health refilling goodies. It's always satisfying to give those little bastards a boot to the butt, and that's one feeling that no other beat 'em up offers. I have a lot of fond memories of playing this with my cousins at sleepovers back in the day, and it still holds up immensely well. Brawler fans should definitely pick this up. This one is completely unique, and there's absolutely nothing like this on the SNES or any other console for that matter. Comic Zone is in a league all its own. Comic Zone tells the tale of Sketch Turner, a comic book artist who just so happens to be pulled into his own creation. As a result, this is another beat-em-up platformer hybrid, but with a twist. The level layouts take place within the panels of the comic! It's a brilliant idea, and it's executed phenomenally. Mortis, the enemy of the comic and the cause of Turner's predicament, draws new enemies into the panels as Turner enters them. It's up to Turner and his martial arts skills, with the help of his pet rat, to take down the evil fiend and return to our reality. Comic Zone is a brilliant concept that made for a fantastic Genesis exclusive, and similar to Altered Beast, it has such a dark tone that I couldn't imagine being on the Super Nintendo. Plus, the soundtrack is really rockin', and that goes a long way for me. Another Disney side-scroller, and a really magical one at that. World of Illusion is of course a sequel to Castle of Illusion, and as with any good sequel, it improves upon everything that Castle of Illusion did right. Castle of Illusion involved a solo mission to save Minnie, but World adds Donald Duck into the mix, and that alone makes it better in my eyes. Factor in the magic element, the more lush color palette, the graphical upgrade, and the flying carpet and water levels, not to mention the exquisite soundtrack, and we have the formula for one of the best adventures from the 16-bit era. Of course, the Super Nintendo had their own magical Mickey Mouse tie-in, and that one completely lives up to its title, but the team-up of Mickey and Donald gives the advantage to Sega. Longtime viewers of my videos should be familiar with this one. I talked about this way back in my first Power Rangers review, and my viewpoint on it has stayed the same. This is not only my favorite Power Rangers title, but one of my favorite beat-em-ups. As with Aladdin, the SNES had their own Power Rangers movie tie-in, but it's completely different, taking more after the original Super Nintendo release. This one is a straight brawler, and I can't get enough of it. It may not stick the greatest to the plot of the film, instead opting to feature events from the show that involve the original Ranger roster, but I think that works for the best. The inclusion of events from the show means that Lord Zed plays a bigger part, and I very much approve of that. The only thing that would have made this better is if they had included a level or two with Tommy as the Green Ranger. Regardless, it's one of the highlights in the genre and very much worth picking up for Power Rangers fans of all ages. Remember how I said that Altered Beast felt mature? Well, Altered Beast soils its pants at the sight of Splatterhouse 2. I previously did a mini review of the original Splatterhouse in my TurboGrafx video, and this sticks very closely to the formula established by that port. The player again takes control of Rick, who, with the help of the Terror Mask, has to return to the site of his nightmares in the hopes of rescuing his girlfriend, Jennifer. Similar to a few of the entries on this list, Splatterhouse 2 is part beat-em-up and part side-scroller. Rick is tormented by a horde of gruesome ghouls, and he has to eliminate them with his fists and feet, as well as additional weapons such as 2x4s, bones, etc. The horrific tone was tailor-made for the Genesis, and it's one of the more sought-after carts in the system's library. It's a bit pricey these days, but it's definitely worth it for Genesis owners that dig the horror genre. Also, is it just me, or does the high-pitched sound that those leaping creatures make when they hit that deadly liquid sound like Michael Jackson? That's just comical. Splatterhouse 2 is creepy as all hell, and it has a sense of humor. Genesis owners, you need this in your collection. Ah yes, the animal mascot that puts the rest to shame. Rocket Knight Adventures is Konami at their 16-bit peak. The titular Rocket Knight is Sparkster the Opossum. Sparkster is one of the coolest heroes from any console generation. He wields a sword and a jetpack, and he can charge up his jetpack to fuel his attack. He can fly at his foes or just become a spinning saw blade of destruction. Either way, the controls are tight and the action is top-notch. Rocket Knight Adventures mainly focuses on platforming, but tosses in shoot-em-up levels when Sparkster takes to the sky. It's a thrilling experience which provides a feeling of soaring for the clouds, which is enhanced by the majestic soundtrack. Rocket Knight Adventures is the pinnacle of platforming, and Konami hit this one out of the park in every category. I've showcased some great games so far, and now we're up to number 1. This entry, another Master System release that was exclusive to the Sega Genesis in regards to the 16-bit consoles, should come as no surprise to longtime viewers. Since most of you probably already know what it is, I'm just going to get right to it. The number one Sega Genesis exclusive is... Yes, call me predictable, but number one couldn't have been anything but Streets of Rage 2. What more do I really have to say about Streets of Rage 2 that I didn't already mention in my review of the trilogy? Streets of Rage 2 is my all-time favorite beat-em-up. It's the reason that I got a Genesis back in the day. I could play Streets of Rage 2 over and over again and still have just as much fun now in my 30s as I did when I was 10. Streets of Rage 2 offers one of the best casts in a beat-em-up. My childhood main was always Skate because he's one cool dude, but I've come to realize as an adult that Axel is the most well-balanced fighter. His Grand Upper or Bare Knuckle is one of the best moves in the game, and doing just that will more than likely ensure victory over Mr. X. Everything about Streets of Rage 2 is amazing, especially the soundtrack by Yuzo Koshiro. If there's any proof needed to validate the quality of the Genesis sound chip, it's in these very songs. The man is a musical genius, and I couldn't imagine the Streets of Rage series without his electronic dance tracks. Between my review and my appearance on the Cartridge Club podcast, which I'll put a link to in the description, I think I've said more than enough about Streets of Rage 2. It's a masterpiece in a plastic cartridge. There we have it, my top 10 reasons that the Genesis does what Nintendon't. Limiting this to just 10 was incredibly tough. There were so many options that I could have included and almost did include, but it didn't quite feel right until I got it into the state it's in now. Like I said before though, this is just my opinion, culled from the carts that I currently own. Feel free to disagree with me and share any other possible choices. The Genesis library is filled with a ton of amazing gems, as is the Super Nintendo of course, so no matter what you go with in the realm of 16 bits, it's sure to be a winner. Anyway, that's all I've got for now. I need to get ready for another appearance in the IUPG court. I'm not going to say what it is of course, but I will say that it's going to be quite an unusual episode. That will be available on the 1st of June, so be sure to come back for that. Until then, this has been Matt, the LJN Defender, and I'll see you again on the next Cygnus Destroyer's Top 10. Bye everyone! Thanks for watching everyone. Like I said before, come back on the 1st of June for the next Innocent Till Proven Guilty, but until then, I've got these videos for you to watch. On the upper left hand corner, that's the first Cygnus Destroyer's Top 10 on the top 10 licensed games that get a bad rap. I had a lot of fun making that because I never thought I'd actually make top 10s like I said in that video, but I'm glad that I changed my mind about doing them, and yeah, I had a blast doing it, so check that out. On the upper right hand corner, that's the newest LJN Defender on Back to the Future 2 and 3, a game that's been long overdue. I mean, I did the original for the pilot at the end of 2013, so yeah, it's been about a year and a half, so it was time that I finally did that, so you should check that out. Now in the bottom left hand corner, that's my cameo appearance that I did in the same name, different game episode of WWF Superstars. Joe asked me to film a little bit for that and talk about what I thought about those games. Well, just the first one really, but I decided to talk about both of them. So until I actually make my LJN Defender episode on those games, you can find out what I think about those by clicking on that link right there. And as always, for anybody who's new to the channel, if you like what you saw, click that red box and that'll subscribe you to the channel and you'll be able to keep up to date with all my content. So again, like I said, come back on the 1st of June for the next Innocent Till Proven Guilty, but until then, I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye!